Captain Lee Hyun carefully maneuvered his ship through the busy space lanes surrounding Nexus Station. The massive trading post stretched for kilometers in every direction, its gleaming towers and docking bays bustling with activity from hundreds of different worlds. Ships of every size and shape moved in organized chaos, from sleek Zephyrian cruisers with their flowing curves to the blocky cargo haulers of the Mantis Collective. The UES Defiance stood out among them all, and not in a good way. Lee watched through his bridge windows as other vessels gave his ship a wide berth. He couldn't blame them. The Defiance looked like something cobbled together in a junkyard during a power outage. Mismatched hull plates created a patchwork pattern across the ship's surface, some sections gleaming silver, while others showed the dull grey of cheaper alloys. Welding scars crisscrossed the hull like battle wounds that had healed badly. "Docking Bay 47 is cleared for our approach, Captain," reported Park Min-ho from the tactical station. The young officer kept his voice steady, but Lee could see the tension in his shoulders. They all felt the stares. "Thank you, Min-ho. Take us in nice and slow. No need to give them more reasons to laugh." As they drew closer to the station, Lee could make out alien faces pressed against viewing ports, pointing at his ship with expressions ranging from amusement to outright disgust. A group of Dominion officers had gathered at one observation deck, their reptilian features animated with what was clearly mocking conversation. The docking procedure took longer than usual. Station traffic control seemed reluctant to assign them a berth near the military section, finally directing them to a commercial dock usually reserved for freight haulers and mining ships. Lee accepted the insult without comment. It actually served their purposes better. Once they were locked into the docking clamps, Lee prepared to disembark. He straightened his uniform and checked his appearance in the small mirror beside his captain's chair. Average height, unremarkable features, the kind of human face that blended into crowds. Perfect for their mission. "Kim Sora, you have the bridge," he said to his chief engineer. "Min-ho, you're with me. We need to handle the supply requisitions personally." The airlock cycled open, and they stepped onto the station proper. Nexus Station's main commercial level buzzed with activity. Traders from a dozen different species hawked their wares, while freight loaders rumbled past carrying exotic goods from across the galaxy. The air hummed with the sound of universal translators working overtime to bridge the communication gaps between so many different races. Almost immediately, Lee heard the whispers start. "Is that the human ship that just docked?" a crystalline merchant asked his companion, his voice carrying despite the attempt at discretion. "Must be. Look at the captain's uniform, so plain, so boring, just like their ship." Two Dominion officers approached from the military section, their scaled skin glistening under the artificial lights. Commander Velthar, recognizable from his intelligence files, led the pair, his yellow eyes fixed on Lee with obvious amusement. Well, the famous human navy has arrived," Velthar said, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "I was beginning to think Earth had given up on space exploration entirely." His companion, a younger officer with bright green scales, gestured toward the viewing port where the Defiance sat among the cargo ships. "Is that really supposed to be a warship, Commander? It looks like someone tried to build a battleship out of spare refrigerator parts." Velthar's laugh was a harsh hissing sound. "Humans, they're so practical, so functional. No sense of style, no appreciation for proper engineering. Look at those weapon systems, kinetic projectile launchers. My ancestors were using better technology when they were still crawling out of swamps." Admiral Keftos materialized nearby, his crystalline body catching and reflecting the station's lights in rainbow patterns. The elegant alien moved with fluid grace, each step a work of art. His species had mastered energy manipulation centuries ago, and it showed in everything they did. "Commander Velthar speaks truth," Keftos said, his voice ringing like crystal chimes. "The human vessel is quaint, like watching children play with toys they don't understand. Those railguns and missile pods are museum pieces. We stopped using such crude weapons before your species learned to make fire." More aliens began to gather, drawn by the spectacle. Lee heard fragments of conversation in a dozen languages, all centered on the same theme. The humans were a joke. Their ship was a disaster waiting to happen. Their technology was primitive and backwards. A cargo handler, one of the station's multi-armed Rigelian workers, paused in his duties to stare at the group. Humans always were strange, he muttered to his partner. Remember when they first showed up 20 years ago? Everyone thought they'd revolutionize space travel. Instead, they just copied everyone else's designs badly. Park Min-ho's jaw tightened at the insults, but Lee placed a calming hand on his arm. They had expected this reaction. In fact, they were counting on it. Let's focus on our supply run, Lee said quietly. We need quantum resonators, dark matter containment units, and gravitational field generators. Standard merchant vessel repairs, nothing unusual. The supply depot manager, a bored-looking cetacean whose species had evolved in the oceans of distant Kepler 442b, barely looked up from his screens when they approached. Human vessel, right? Let me guess. Another patched-together conversion, trying to pass for a real ship. Just a working vessel that needs some maintenance, Lee replied diplomatically. Sure. We get a lot of human ships through here, always breaking down, always needing repairs. Your species just doesn't understand proper engineering principles. As they completed their transactions, Lee noticed how other customers and workers gave them a wide berth. Some whispered behind their hands, others pointed openly. A few seemed genuinely curious about these strange humans and their cobbled-together ship, but most simply dismissed them as another example of human incompetence. In space, the irony wasn't lost on him. If these aliens knew what the Defiance really was, what it could really do, their laughter would turn to screams. But that was exactly the point. Nobody took a threat seriously when it looked like junk, hidden beneath that ugly exterior, beyond. The mismatched hull plates and seemingly primitive weapons lay technology that would redefine warfare itself. The Defiance wasn't just humanity's latest experiment. It was their secret weapon, disguised as failure and deployed among the stars to await the moment when the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of. That moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Lee Hyun and his crew left Nexus Station amid the laughter and mockery of alien commanders. The UES Defiance had continued its patrol route through the outer systems, maintaining the appearance of a simple merchant vessel conducting routine security sweeps. Life aboard the ship had settled into a comfortable rhythm, with Park Min-ho running tactical drills and Kim Sora fine-tuning the hidden systems that gave their ship its true power. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning, ship time. The first warning came from the deep space monitoring stations positioned at the edge of the Kepler system. Automated sensors detected massive gravitational distortions, the telltale signs of ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. But these weren't ordinary ships making routine jumps between star systems. Lieutenant Commander Park sat at his station, watching the sensor readings with growing alarm. Captain, you need to see this. Long-range scanners are picking up massive energy signatures at grid reference 77 Alpha. Lee hurried to the tactical display, coffee mug still in hand. What he saw made his blood run cold. The screen showed 300 distinct contacts, each one larger than a standard battlecruiser. But size wasn't what made them terrifying. It was their design. The ships were black. Not painted black, but constructed from some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish hunting in the depths of space. Each vessel bristled with weapon ports, their hulls covered in spikes and protrusions that served no purpose except to intimidate. Kim Sora, get me a full spectrum analysis on those ships, Lee ordered. I want to know everything about them. The chief engineer's fingers flew over her console. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures I've never seen before. These aren't using any known propulsion system. And those weapons, they're using some kind of dark energy projection technology that's completely off our charts. The communication board suddenly crackled to life. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect, universal standard, but carrying an undertone that made everyone's skin crawl. It was the sound of something that had never known mercy, never understood the concept of peaceful coexistence. Inhabitants of this system, the voice began, each word dripping with casual malice. I am War Prime Ajkar of the Devourer Fleet. Your worlds, your resources, your very lives now belong to us. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is inevitability. Lee watched the tactical display as the black ships spread out, taking positions that would allow them to strike at every inhabited world in the system simultaneously. These weren't raiders looking for quick profit or territorial expansionists seeking new colonies. These were destroyers, pure and simple. "We have consumed 12 systems before yours," Ajakar continued, his voice now broadcasting across every frequency, reaching every ship and station in the sector. "Billions have tried to resist us. All have failed. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Fight us and we will make your suffering legendary." The response was immediate and predictable. Across Nexus Station, alarm klaxons began wailing. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication networks as civilian ships scrambled to evacuate, and military commanders tried desperately to coordinate some kind of defense. Lee listened to the chaos unfolding on the emergency channels. Commander Velthar's voice cracked with panic as he screamed orders to his subordinates. "Get me Admiral Keftos. Where are our reinforcements? How long until the Third Fleet arrives?" Another voice, tight with fear, responded. "Sir, the Third Fleet is 6 days away at maximum burn. The crystalline defense force is scattered across 4 systems. We're on our own." Admiral Keftos materialized. On the main command frequency, his usually melodious voice now sharp with terror. "All civilian vessels begin immediate evacuation procedures. Military ships form defensive positions around the station. We'll hold them as long as we can." But, even as he spoke, everyone knew it was hopeless. The station's defenses consisted of 2 patrol cruisers, a handful of system defense platforms, and whatever armed merchant vessels happened to be in port. Against 300 Devourer warships, they might as well throw rocks. That's when Captain Lee made his decision. "Open a channel, all frequencies," he told Park Minho. "Sir, are you sure about this? Do it." The communication array activated, broadcasting Lee's voice across the entire system. His words cut through the panic and chaos like a blade through silk. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the United Earth Ship Defiance. I am moving to intercept the hostile fleet." The effect was instantaneous. Every emergency channel fell silent. In command centers across Nexus Station, alien officers stared at their displays in stunned disbelief. Commander Velthar was the first to break the silence. Did that human just say he's going to intercept the entire Devourer fleet? By himself?" whispered one of his subordinates. Admiral Keftos activated his personal communicator, trying to reach the Defiance directly. "Captain Hyun, this is Admiral Keftos. Please clarify your last transmission. Surely you don't mean to engage 300 enemy vessels with a single ship?" Lee's response was calm, almost conversational. "That's exactly what I mean, Admiral. All civilian vessels, begin your evacuation immediately. We'll buy you the time you need." Across the system, the same thought echoed in dozens of different languages. The human had finally lost his mind. War Prime Ajakar received Lee's transmission aboard his flagship with something approaching amusement. The Devourer commander was ancient by most species standards, having led his fleet across the galaxy for over 2 centuries. He had seen every form of courage, desperation, and stupidity that sentient beings could display in the face of certain death. "Her single ship challenges the entire fleet," Ajakar mused to his subordinates. "How refreshing. It has been some time since we encountered such delightful insanity." His tactical officer, a creature that had once been something else before, the Devourer's dark science transformed it into a living weapon, studied the approaching human vessel. War Prime, sensors indicate it is the same merchant conversion that docked at the station 3 weeks ago. A pathetic collection of scrap metal and outdated weapons. Ajkar's laugh was like grinding glass. "Then we shall give this brave fool the honor of being our first kill. Perhaps the others will learn from his example." Unknown to both the panicking aliens and the confident Devourers, the UES Defiance was already powering up systems that existed in no alien database. Hidden behind those mismatched hull plates, experimental technology hummed to life for the first time in actual combat conditions. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one nobody takes seriously. The moment of truth arrived faster than anyone expected. War Prime Ajakar, growing tired of what he saw as a pointless delay, decided to make an example of the lone human ship. His flagship, a massive dreadnought called the World Render powered up its primary weapons array. Around it, dozens of smaller Devourer vessels followed suit, their dark hulls crackling with malevolent energy. "All ships focus fire on the human vessel," Ajkar commanded. "Let us show these system dwellers what happens to those who defy the Devourers." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dark energy beams lanced out from every direction, each one capable of cutting a planet in half. Antimatter torpedoes streaked through space like falling stars, their warheads containing enough destructive power to level entire cities. Quantum disruptors fired in rapid succession, weapons designed to tear apart the very fabric of matter itself. The combined firepower of 50 Devourer warships converged on a single point in space, where the UES Defiance hung motionless, apparently frozen in terror at the approaching death. On Nexus Station, alien commanders watched in horrified fascination. Commander Velthar gripped his console with clawed hands, his reptilian features twisted in a mixture of anticipation and disgust. The fool actually thought he could challenge them. "Now we'll all die because of human arrogance." Admiral Keftos said nothing, his crystalline body refracting the light from the tactical displays. But deep in his alien mind, something nagged at him. The human captain had seemed too calm, too confident, almost as if he knew something the rest of them didn't. The Devourer weapons reached their target and passed right through empty space. The UES Defiance was gone. Not destroyed, not vaporized, not even damaged. Simply gone as if it had never existed at all. The massive energy beams continued past the ship's last known position and dissipated harmlessly into the void. Antimatter torpedoes, finding no target to lock onto, self-destructed in brilliant flashes that illuminated nothing but cosmic dust. Aboard the Defiance, Kim Sora monitored her engineering displays with professional satisfaction. "Phase shift. Successful, Captain. All systems are operating within normal parameters. Dimensional anchor is holding steady." Captain Lee nodded, studying the tactical display that showed enemy ships still firing at their previous position. The view outside their bridge windows showed the same starfield as before, but now everything looked slightly different. The stars seemed shifted, their light carrying a subtle blue tinge that hadn't been there moments before. They were still in the same location, technically speaking, but they were also somewhere else entirely, existing in a pocket of twisted space-time that made them invisible to conventional sensors and immune to normal weapons. It was technology that humanity had developed in secret, based on theoretical physics that most alien races hadn't even discovered yet. "Minho, target their flagship with the primary gravity lance," Lee ordered calmly. "Let's announce our presence properly." Park Minho's hands moved across his control panel with practiced efficiency. The weapon system that had appeared to be nothing more than a primitive railgun began to charge, but what it fired had nothing to do with kinetic projectiles. Instead, it generated a focused beam of gravitational force, essentially creating a miniature black hole and directing its crushing power at a specific target. "Firing," Minho reported, his voice as steady as if he were conducting a routine training. The exercise, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The gravitational lance struck Warprime Ajkar's flagship dead center, and the massive dreadnought simply collapsed. Its hull, designed to withstand antimatter explosions and quantum fire, crumpled like aluminum foil in the face of forces that could bend space itself. The World Render, pride of the Devourer fleet, compressed into a sphere roughly the size of a basketball before disappearing entirely into the artificial singularity that had consumed it. The silence that followed was deafening. Warprime Ajkar, who had been standing on his command bridge just moments before, no longer existed. His ship, his crew, his centuries of conquest and terror, all of it gone in an instant, crushed out of existence by forces he couldn't comprehend. The remaining Devourer ships hung motionless in space, their crews struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. Their sensors showed nothing. No energy discharge, no projectile, no explanation for how their most powerful vessel had simply ceased to exist. "Warprime, respond!" called out one of the surviving captains. "Warprime." "Ajkar, please acknowledge." But there was no response, because there was no longer anyone to respond. The Defiance phased back into normal space, appearing directly behind a cluster of 6 Devourer cruisers. The alien ships, still trying to process the destruction of their flagship, barely had time to register the human vessel's presence before the gravity lance fired again. This time, Lee had ordered a wider dispersal pattern. Instead of focusing the gravitational field on a single target, Kim Sora's modifications spread the effect across multiple ships. The result was even more spectacular. All 6 vessels imploded simultaneously, their hulls collapsing inward as artificial gravity wells crushed them beyond recognition. On Nexus Station, the alien commanders who had been mocking humanity just hours before now stared at their displays in stunned silence. What they were seeing violated everything they understood about physics, warfare, and technology. Commander Velthar's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Impossible. This is impossible. They're using technology that doesn't exist." Admiral Keftos finally found his voice, though it trembled with something between awe and terror. "The humans, they've been hiding this from us. All this time, while we laughed at their primitive ships and crude weapons, they were developing technology that makes our most advanced systems look like stone tools." The communication board crackled to life as Captain Lee's voice filled the command centers across the station. His tone remained calm and professional, as if he were discussing weather conditions rather than the systematic destruction of the galaxy's most feared fleet. "All civilian vessels begin evacuation procedures immediately. Proceed to the outer system jump points and prepare for faster-than-light travel. We'll maintain position here and ensure your safe passage." The contrast was staggering. Minutes ago, these same aliens had been preparing to die, accepting the inevitable destruction that came with facing the Devourer fleet. Now a single human ship was offering them protection, speaking of their survival as if it were already assured. But as they watched the Defiance systematically dismantle ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades, that assurance began to seem less impossible and more like simple fact. The age of underestimating humanity was ending, one imploded Devourer ship at a time. The destruction of War Prime Ajakar's flagship had been shocking enough, but what came next defied everything. The watching aliens thought they knew about warfare. The UES Defiance didn't engage in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, it moved through the Devourer fleet like a predator stalking prey, appearing and disappearing at will, striking from angles that shouldn't have been possible. Captain Lee stood calmly on his bridge, watching the tactical display as his ship phased between dimensions. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and coordinated. There was no panic, no shouting, no dramatic heroics, just professionals doing a job they had trained years to perfect. "Kim Sora, how are our phase generators holding up?" Lee asked. His chief engineer glanced up from her console, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. "Running at 70% capacity, Captain. We can maintain phase shift operations for another 2 hours at this rate." "More than enough time," Lee replied, then turned to his tactical officer. "Minho, target the next formation. Those cruisers are bunched too tight together." Park Minho studied his targeting display, calculating angles and gravitational fields with the same care a chess master might plan several moves ahead. "I count 12 ships in that formation, Captain. Recommend a cascading gravity pulse to maximize the effect." "Approved. Fire when ready." The Defiance materialized above the Devourer formation, its ugly hull suddenly appearing where nothing had been moments before. The gravity lance fired, but this time Kim Sora had modified the weapon's output to create a chain reaction. The gravitational field struck the lead ship and compressed it into a dense ball of twisted metal. But the gravitational waves didn't stop there. They rippled outward through space, catching the ships flying in tight formation behind the first target. One by one, 12 Devourer vessels collapsed in on themselves, their hulls crumpling like tin cans under tremendous pressure. The effect cascaded through their formation like dominoes falling, each ship's destruction creating gravitational disturbances that weakened the next target's structural integrity. The remaining Devourer captains watched in horror as their comrades simply ceased to exist. These were ships that had survived battles against entire planetary defense fleets, vessels that had weathered antimatter bombardments and energy weapon arrays that could melt asteroid belts. Now, they were being destroyed by forces their sensors couldn't even detect. "How are they doing this?" screamed one Devourer commander over the fleet communication network. "Our shields aren't even registering the attacks." That was the terrifying truth. The human weapons weren't using energy that could be deflected by conventional shields. They were manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe itself, bending space and time to crush their enemies. It was like trying to shield against gravity itself, theoretically possible, but requiring technology the Devourers had never imagined. The Defiance vanished again, only to reappear in the middle of another enemy formation. This time the ship didn't fire any weapons. Instead, it simply existed in a space where several Devourer vessels were already flying, and the laws of physics took care of the rest. The alien ships, unable to occupy the same space as the human vessel, were shredded by the dimensional interference. Commander Velthar, watching from Nexus Station, found his voice at last. "They're not fighting a battle. They're hunting, like a predator picking off members of a herd." Admiral Keftos nodded slowly, his crystalline features reflecting the light from the tactical displays. "Look at the pattern of their attacks. They're not just destroying ships randomly. They're targeting command vessels, communication relays, and formation leaders. They're systematically dismantling the fleet's ability to coordinate." He was right. Captain Lee wasn't simply killing Devourer ships. He was conducting surgical strikes designed to maximize chaos and confusion among the enemy ranks. Each target was chosen for maximum psychological impact, turning the once disciplined fleet into a scattered mob of terrified individuals. "Kim Sora, charge the Alcubierre drive," Lee ordered. "I want to try something new." His engineer's eyes widened slightly. They had tested the Alcubierre drive in simulations, but never in actual combat conditions. The theoretical physics were sound, but theory and practice were often very different things when people were shooting at you. "Captain, are you sure? The stress on our hull could be significant." "I'm sure. We need to end this quickly before they scatter completely." "How long for full charge?" Kim Sora's fingers danced across her control panel, rerouting power from non-essential systems to the experimental drive. 30 seconds, sir. But I have to warn you, using the drive this close to enemy ships could create some unusual effects." "That's what I'm counting on." Minho, plot a course directly through the center of their main formation. Maximum velocity. The Alcubierre drive was humanity's most advanced propulsion technology, based on theoretical work that dated back to the early 21st century. Instead of pushing a ship through space, it compressed space-time in front of the vessel while expanding it behind, essentially allowing the ship to ride a wave of distorted space at speeds that made conventional faster-than-light travel look. "Pedestrian, drive charged and ready, Captain," Kim Sora reported. "Execute." What happened next defied every known law of physics that the watching aliens understood. The Defiance didn't accelerate in any traditional sense. Instead, space itself moved around the ship, carrying it forward at velocities that sensors couldn't even measure properly. The human vessel vanished from its position and reappeared instantly in the heart of the largest Devourer formation, but its passage left a wake of twisted space-time that propagated outward like ripples on a pond. Any ship caught in that wake was torn apart by forces that alternately stretched and compressed matter beyond its breaking point. 17 Devourer vessels died in that single pass, their hulls twisted into impossible shapes by the distortion of space-time itself. The survivors found themselves scattered across thousands of kilometers, their tight formations broken and their coordination shattered. The new War Prime, a hastily promoted captain who had assumed command after Ajkar's death, finally found his voice. "All ships, fall back immediately. We cannot fight this sorcery." But Captain Lee wasn't finished. As the Devourer fleet began to retreat in panic, the Defiance pursued them relentlessly. Each enemy ship that tried to flee found itself targeted by weapons that ignored shields, armor, and every defensive system known to galactic warfare. "Captain," Park Minho said quietly, "the survivors are breaking formation completely. Should we let them go?" Lee studied the tactical display, watching scattered Devourer ships fleeing in every direction. Some were broadcasting surrender signals, others were simply running at maximum speed toward the edge of the system. His expression remained calm, but there was steel in his voice when he replied. "These ships have destroyed 12 entire star systems, Minho. Billions of innocent people died because of them. We let them go now, and they'll just find another system to terrorize." The hunt continued for another hour. One by one, the Defiants tracked down fleeing Devourer vessels and eliminated them with the same surgical precision that had marked the entire engagement. By the time it was over, only a handful of enemy ships remained, those that had broadcast unconditional surrender and powered down their weapon systems completely. On Nexus Station, alien commanders who had spent their careers studying military, tactics and strategy watched in stunned silence as everything they thought they knew about warfare crumbled before their eyes. The humans hadn't just won a battle, they had redefined what was possible in space combat. The age of energy weapons and particle shields was over. The age of human technological supremacy had begun. The massive Devourer warship struggled through space, barely holding together. Smoke poured from countless holes in its hull. Inside, the surviving crew members couldn't believe what had just happened. They had come to destroy one small human ship. Instead, they were running for their lives. The UES Defiants followed them for a while, making sure they were really leaving. Captain Lee stood on the bridge, watching the enemy flee. His crew was tired but proud. They had done something nobody thought possible. A single human ship had defeated an entire Devourer fleet. "Sir, they're jumping to hyperspace," the navigation officer reported. "Should we pursue?" "No," Lee said quietly. "Let them run. Let them tell everyone what happened. Here today." As the last enemy ship disappeared into the darkness, the Defiants turned back toward Nexus Station. The journey back felt different this time. Before, they had traveled these same routes while being mocked and dismissed. Now, every ship they passed moved aside respectfully. Word had already spread through the communication networks. The humans had won. When they arrived at Nexus Station, the difference was immediate. The same docking bay that had been nearly empty before was now packed with representatives from every major species. The crystallines floated in perfect formation, the scaled warriors of the Dominion stood at attention, even the mysterious Void. Walkers had sent observers. The station's massive view screens still showed recordings of the battle. Alien crowds gathered around them, watching in silence as the human ship danced between enemy fire, striking back with weapons they had never seen before. Some pointed at the screens, speaking in hushed whispers. Others simply stared in amazement. Admiral Keftos approached as Captain Lee stepped off his ship. The crystalline leader's body sparkled with what Lee had learned was a sign of deep respect. The Admiral's form bent forward in a formal bow, something Lee had never seen a crystalline do for any other species. "Captain Lee," the Admiral's voice resonated through the docking bay, "I must apologize for our earlier behavior. The crystalline hegemony formally requests a defense pact with humanity. We see now that we greatly misjudged your people's capabilities." Before Lee could respond, Commander Velthar of the Dominion stepped forward. The reptilian warrior's scales had shifted to a golden color, their highest mark of honor. "The Dominion agrees with the crystallines. We offer our most advanced shield technology in exchange for your protection. Our engineers are ready to share their knowledge immediately." Other species pressed forward with their own offers. The ethereal singers offered their communication networks. The mechanical builders promised to share their construction techniques. Everyone suddenly wanted to be humanity's friend. Everyone wanted access to their technology. Captain Lee raised his hand for silence. The crowd immediately stopped talking, another sign of their newfound respect. "We appreciate your offers," he said carefully. "Earth values friendship and cooperation. But humanity's strength has always come from thinking differently, not from copying others. We succeeded today because we approached warfare from a human perspective." "But surely you need allies," Admiral Keftos insisted. "The Devourers will return with larger fleets, they always do." "Then we'll be ready," Lee replied simply. "And yes, we welcome allies, but as equals, not as protectors or protected. Humanity stands on its own feet." The gathered aliens exchanged glances. This was not how smaller civilizations usually acted after their first major victory. most immediately sought the protection of larger powers, but the humans seemed completely confident in their ability to defend themselves. A young crystalline officer couldn't contain her curiosity. "Captain, may we ask about your weapons? The energy signatures were unlike anything in our databases." Lee smiled slightly. "I'm afraid those details are classified, but I can say this. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for a very long time. We've been watching, learning, and developing our own path. As the Defiance prepared to depart, the crew performed final checks on all systems. The battle had pushed their ship hard, but human engineering had held strong. The prototype weapons had performed even better than expected. The armor had absorbed tremendous damage without failing. Captain Lee made his final log entry as alien vessels cleared a respectful path for his ship. Mission successful. Prototype testing exceeded all expectations. Command should know that the aliens' underestimation of human capabilities proved to be their greatest strategic error. They thought they understood humanity based on our size and apparent technology level. They were completely wrong." He paused, looking out at the alien fleet that now treated them as equals, or perhaps even superiors. The same beings who had laughed at humanity just days ago now watched them leave, with something approaching fear. "Recommend immediate implementation of Phase 2, Lee continued his log. "The element of surprise is gone, but psychological advantage has been established. They respect us now, but more importantly, they fear what else we might be hiding." The captain closed the log and turned to his first officer. "Take us home. Earth needs to know what happened here." As the Defiance jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Keftos stood in his office studying the battle recordings for the 100th time. His aide floated beside him, equally puzzled. "How did we miss this?" the aide asked. "How did such a young species develop such advanced warfare capabilities without anyone noticing?" "Because we weren't looking," the Admiral admitted. "We saw what we expected to see. A small new species barely able to travel between stars. We never considered they might have chosen to appear weak while growing strong in secret." "What troubles me most," the aide said slowly, "is what the human captain said as he left. He called their ship a prototype. If this was just a test vehicle," the Admiral's form flickered with worry, "then their real fleet could be far more powerful than anything we've seen. Back on Earth, in hidden shipyards beneath the ocean and inside hollowed-out asteroids, thousands of workers received the news of the Defiance's success. They smiled and returned to their tasks with renewed energy. The prototype had proven the concept. Now it was time to build the real fleet. Massive warships took shape in the darkness. Each one incorporated lessons learned from centuries of watching alien conflicts. Each one carried weapons designed specifically to counter galactic standard defenses. Humanity had spent generations as the galaxy's students. Now it was time to become its teachers. The age of being underestimated was truly over. But the age of humanity had just begun.